When the term serial killer is mentioned in a conversation, the name Ted Bundy will most likely be mentioned as well. Ted Bundy was wanted for at least 36 murders in Colorado, Oregon, Utah, Florida, and Washington. Considered as a very smart person, he even escaped the police a couple of times. Hello everyone and welcome to Noches de Terror to Study English. My name is Cesar and I'm a university English teacher in Mexico. As a language learner myself, siempre me ha gustado aprender con historias y películas de terror. Así que me hice la pregunta, ¿por qué no un podcast para aprender inglés con una temática de terror? Y así nació esta idea. Espero les guste and you too can enjoy these stories while learning English. This story has been adapted for B1 learners, and if you would like to listen along with subtitles, you can check our YouTube channel. Also, feel free to change the speed if you think I am speaking too fast. In our 6th episode, we will talk about the life and murders of Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Cowell was born in Burlington, Vermont, at the Elizabeth Lund Home for the Unwed Mothers. His mother's name was Eleanor Luz Cowell. Even though we don't know who his father was, Bundy's birth certificate says Lloyd Marshall, but Bundy's mother later said she was seduced by a war veteran named Jack Worthington. During the beginning years of his life, Bundy and his mother resided in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1950, Bundy and his mother, who he thought was his sister, relocated to Tacoma, Washington, to live with family members. It was in Tacoma that Louise Cowell had her son's last name changed from Cowell to Nelson. En 1915, tan solo un año después de mudarse, Louise Cowell asistió a un evento para adultos solteros en la primera iglesia metodista de Tacoma, donde conoció a Johnny Culpeper Bundy. Se casaron en mayo del mismo año y poco después Johnny Bundy adoptó oficialmente a Ted, cambiando su apellido a Bundy. Johnny and Louise Bundy had additional children, and young Bundy often took care of them. Despite Johnny Bundy's effort to involve his stepson in camping and father-son outings, the boy didn't form an emotional connection with his stepfather. Bundy performed well academically at Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma and participated in a nearby Methodist church. He even held the position of vice president in the Methodist Youth Fellowship. He was also engaged with a local chapter of the Boy Scouts of America. Bundy continued to be shy and reserved during his high school and initial college days. Looking back, he mentioned that he faced difficulties during high school, struggling to grasp social norms and hindering his social growth. Despite appearing socially active, he lacked an inherent understanding of building relationships with others. He expressed, "I was uncertain about how things worked. I couldn't figure out how people became friends or what caused people to be drawn to each other. I couldn't grasp the foundations of social interactions." En 1965, Bundy completó sus estudios en la preparatoria Woodrow Wilson. Recibió una beca de la Universidad Puget Sound y comenzó a asistir en otoño, centrando sus estudios en psicología y estudios orientales. Sin embargo, después de 2 semestres en la Universidad de Puget Sound, decidió cambiar a la Universidad de Washington en Seattle. During this time at the university, Bundy held various jobs, including working as a grocery badger and shelf stocker at the Safeway store in Seattle's Queen Anne Hill neighborhood. Additionally, he took up other odd jobs. As part of his psychology studies, he volunteered for the night shift at the Seattle Suicide Hotline, a center aiding people in crisis, particularly those struggling with thoughts of suicide across the greater Seattle area. It was during this time that he crossed paths and collaborated with Ann Rule, a former policewoman and aspiring crime writer from Seattle. During his time at the University of Washington in 1967, he entered into a relationship with a fellow university student using the pseudonym Stephanie Brooks. They met during their enrollment at the university. After she graduated in 1968 and went back to her family in California, she chose to end the relationship. She cited Bundy's lack of maturity and ambition as reasons for her decision. Anne Rule mentions that around this period, Bundy made a decision to travel to his birthplace, Burlington, Vermont. According to Rule, during his visit, he went to the local records clerk and finally unveiled the truth about his biological parentage. Después de descubrir su verdadera ascendencia, Bundy experimentó una transformación y se volvió más decidido y seguro de sí mismo. En 1968, se hizo cargo de la oficina de Seattle para la campaña presidencial de Nelson Rockefeller e incluso asistió a la convención republicana de 1968 en Miami, Florida, como partidario de Rockefeller. Regresó a la Universidad de Washington, esta vez para estudiar psicología. Durante esta etapa, Bundy destacó académicamente como estudiante sobresaliente y ganó el respeto de sus profesores. En 1969, inició una relación con Elizabeth Clover, una secretaria divorciada con una hija, quien se enamoró profundamente de él. Permanecieron juntos durante más de 6 años hasta su encarcelamiento en 1976 por secuestro. In 1972, Bundy successfully completed his psychology degree at the University of Washington. Shortly after that, he re-engaged with the state Republican Party, establishing a close connection with Governor Daniel J. Evans. During this period, Bundy was involved in the campaign, trailing the Democratic candidate around the state, recording his speeches and providing personal updates to Governor Evans. However, a minor controversy emerged when the Democrats discovered that Bundy, who had been pretending to be a college student, was involved in these activities. During the fall of 1973, Bundy enrolled in the law school at the University of Utah, but he struggled academically. His attendance became sporadic, eventually leading to his decision to withdraw from the program in the spring of 1974. During a business trip to California in the summer of 1973, Bundy re-entered the life of his ex-girlfriend Stephanie Brooks with a changed appearance and demeanor. This time, he presented himself as a serious and committed professional who had been admitted to law school. Bundy continued his relationship with Clover alongside this, with neither woman knowing about the other. Throughout the remainder of the year, Bundy pursued Brooks and even proposed marriage to her. However, just 2 weeks later, shortly after the start of 1974, he abruptly ended the relationship, cutting off communication and refusing to respond to her calls. A few weeks after this breakup, Bundy began a series of murders in Washington state. In 1973, a friend of Bundy from the Republican Party noticed a set of handcuffs in the back of Bundy's Volkswagen. For a considerable period, he was a person of interest in the December 1973 killing of Katie Devine in Washington state. However, DNA analysis ultimately led to the arrest and conviction of another individual for that crime in 2002. Bundy's first confirmed known murders took place in 1974 when he was 27 years old. Poco después de la medianoche del 4 de enero de 1974, Bundy se introdujo en el dormitorio en el sótano de una bailarina de 18 años y estudiante de la Universidad de Washington. Utilizando el seudónimo Johnny Lenz, mientras ella dormía, Bundy la golpeó con una varilla de metal del marco de su cama y luego la agredió sexualmente utilizando un espéculo. Lenz fue descubierta al día siguiente por sus compañeras de cuarto, inconsciente y en un charco de sangre. Aunque sobrevivió al ataque, sufrió daño cerebral duradero como consecuencia. Bundy's subsequent target was Linda Ann Healy, another student at the University of Washington, and his cousin's roommate. During the early hours of February 1st, 1974, Bundy forcibly entered Healy's room, rendered her unconscious, clothed her in jeans and a shirt, enveloped her in a bedsheet, and then removed her from the scene. The disappearances of young student girls occurred at the frequency of about one every month. On March 12, 1974, in Olympia, Bundy abducted and killed Donna Gail Manson, a 19-year-old student attending the Evergreen State College. Susan Rancourt vanished from the Central Washington State College campus in Ellensburg on April 17, 1974. Subsequently, two different students shared accounts of encounters with a man wearing a cast on his arm, one on that same night and another 3 nights earlier. This man asked for their assistance in carrying a lot of books to his Volkswagen Beetle. Después de la desaparición de Kathy Parks, quien fue vista por última vez en el campus de la Universidad Estatal de Oregon el 6 de mayo de 1974, llegó la desaparición de Brenda Ball. Fue vista por última vez saliendo de The Flame Tavern en Burton el 1 de junio de 1974. Después de esto, Bundy apuntó a Georgian Hawkins, un estudiante de la Universidad de Washington y miembro de la hermandad Kappa Alpha Theta. En las primeras horas del 11 de junio de 1974, Hawkins se trasladó desde el dormitorio de su novio a la casa de su hermandad a través de un callejón. Nunca regresó. Testigos mencionaron más tarde haber visto un hombre con una pierna enyesada luchando por llevar un maletín esa noche. Otra estudiante informó que el hombre le pidió ayuda para transportar el maletín a su Volkswagen Beetle. Bundy's series of killings in Washington reached its culmination on July 14, 1974, with the abduction of Janice Ott and Dennis Nusland during the daytime from the Lake Sammamish State Park in Issaquah. On that day, a total of 8 people reported to the police about an attractive young man with his left arm in a sling who identified himself as Ted. 5 of these individuals were women approached by Ted, who sought their help to unload a sailboat from his Volkswagen Beetle. One of these women even walked with Ted to his car, only to find no sailboat, and then decided against going any further with him. 3 additional witnesses confirmed that they saw him approach Ott with the sailboat story and observed her departing from the beach alongside him. Unfortunately, Ott was never seen alive again. Nusland also vanished without any traces just 4 hours later. The King County detectives now possessed a detailed description of the suspect and his vehicle. Some witnesses informed investigators that the Ted they encountered spoke with an accent resembling a clipped British-like manner. Consequently, flyers were distributed widely throughout the Seattle region. As news reports featured the police sketch and description of the subject from Lake Sammamish, Bundy's girlfriend, one of his psychology professors at the University of Washington, and a former co-worker named Ann Rue all voiced suspicions about him. The police, inundated with around 200 tips every day, did not give special attention to a tip concerning a well-groomed law student. On September 7, 1974, the dismembered remains of Ott and Nusland were found near Interstate 90, approximately 1 mile from the park close to Issaquah. Alongside the women's remains were an additional femur bone and vertebrae. Just before his execution, Bundy would confirm that these belonged to Georgian Hawkins. From March 1st to March 3rd, 1975, the skulls and jawbones of Healy, Ranker, Parks, and Ball were discovered on Taylor Mountain, located east of Issaquah. In later years, Bundy confessed to having left Donna Manson's body there as well, but unfortunately no evidence of her was ever located. Bundy smiled for the cameras and entered a not guilty plea during a press conference that announced his indictment on charges of first-degree murder. During that fall, Bundy resumed his education at the University of Utah Law School in Salt Lake City. Tragically, he also resumed his pattern of killing in October. On October 2nd, 1974, Nancy Wilcox vanished from Holiday, Utah. She was last observed riding in a Volkswagen Beetle. On October 18, 1974, Bundy murdered Melissa Smith, the 17-year-old daughter of Midvale Police Chief Louis Smith. Bundy raped, sodomized, and strangled her. Melissa Smith's body was discovered 9 days later. Following that, Bundy targeted Laura Aim, who was also 17 years old. Laura vanished after leaving a Halloween party in Lehi, Utah on October 31st, 1974. Sadly, her lifeless body, bearing signs of assault and strangulation, was located almost a month later by hikers on Thanksgiving Day near the riverbanks in America Fork Canyon. El 8 de noviembre de 1974 en Murray, Utah, Carol Darrach escapó por poco con su vida. Haciéndose pasar por el oficial Roseland del Departamento de Policía de Murray, Bundy se le acercó en el centro comercial Fashion Place, afirmando falsamente que alguien había intentado robar en su auto. La convenció de que lo acompañara a la comisaría de policía. Ella subió a su auto, pero se negó a abrocharse el cinturón de seguridad como se lo indicó. Después de conducir un corto trecho, Bundy de repente se detuvo y trató de esposarla. En su lucha, accidentalmente aseguró ambos lazos en la misma muñeca. Luego, Bundy intentó usar una palanca, pero Darrach logró atraparla en el aire, evitando un golpe potencialmente mortal en la cabeza. Logró abrir la puerta del auto y escapar a la autopista, evitando así a su potencial asesino. Around an hour later, an unfamiliar man arrived at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, Utah, where the drama club was staging a play. He approached the drama teacher and then a student, requesting their presence outside in the parking lot to identify a car. Both declined his request. The drama teacher spotted him once more shortly before the play concluded. This time he appeared out of breath with disheveled hair and an untucked shirt. Another student noticed the man lurking towards the back of the auditorium. Debbie Kent, a 17-year-old student at Viewmont High, left the play during the intermission to pick up her brother and was never seen again. Later, investigators discovered a small key in the parking lot outside Viewmont High. This key turned out to be the one used to unlock the handcuffs removed from Carol Darrach earlier. In 1975, when he was studying law at the University of Utah, Bundy began committing crimes in Colorado. On January 12, 1975, Karen Campbell went missing from the Wildwood Inn in Snowmass, Colorado. She was there on vacation with her fiancé and his children. She disappeared within a short distance of 50 feet between the elevator doors and her room. Her body was discovered on February 17, 1975. Después de eso, una instructora de esquí llamada Julie Cunningham desapareció el 15 de marzo de 1975 en Vail. Luego, el 6 de abril de 1975, Dennis Oliverson desapareció en Grand Junction. Mientras estaba en prisión, Bundy admitió a los investigadores de Colorado que fingió necesitar muletas para acercarse a Cunningham. Le pidió que lo ayudara a llevar unas botas de esquí a su auto. Una vez en el auto, Bundy la golpeó con una palanca y la esposó para evitar que se moviera. Luego la estranguló, lo que fue muy similar a la forma en que cometió el asesinato de Hawkins. On May 6, 1975, Lynette Colbier disappeared in Pocatello, Idaho, from her junior high school. When he went back to Utah, Susan Curtis went missing on June 28, 1975. The bodies of Cunningham, Culver, Curtis, and Oliverson were never found. At the same time, in Washington, investigators were working to manage their long list of potential suspects. They used computers to compare various lists of likely suspects, such as Linda Healy's classmate of Volkswagen owners, and identify individuals who appeared on multiple lists. Theodore Robert Bundy was among 25 individuals who appeared on 4 different lists. His case file was the second one in the pile of cases to be investigated when they received a call from Utah about an arrest. On August 16, 1975, Bundy was taken into custody in Salt Lake City for not stopping when a police officer signaled him to. A search of his car uncovered a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, an ice pick, and other items that the police believed could be used for burglaries. Bundy stayed composed while being questioned and mentioned he used the mask for skiing and found the handcuffs in a dumpster. Utah detective Jerry Thompson linked Bundy and his Volkswagen to the Darrach kidnapping and the cases of the missing girls. As a result, they searched his apartment. During the search, they found a brochure of Colorado's ski resorts with a check mark next to the Wildwood Inn where Kerry Campbell had gone missing. Following the apartment search, the police asked Bundy to participate in a lineup in front of the ranch and the witnesses from Bountiful. They recognized him as the person who had identified himself as Officer Roseland and as the man who was seen around the night Debbie Kent disappeared. Después de un juicio que duró una semana, Bundy fue declarado culpable de secuestrar a The Ranch el 1 de marzo de 1976 y recibió una condena de 15 años de prisión en la penitenciaría estatal de Utah. Sin embargo, las autoridades de Colorado también estaban investigando cargos de asesinato en su contra. Como resultado, Bundy fue llevado a Colorado mediante extradición para enfrentar un juicio ahí. On June 7, 1977, in anticipation of a hearing for the Kerry Campbell murder case, Bundy was brought to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen. While courthouse proceedings were temporarily paused, he was permitted to go to the courthouse's law library. There, he managed to escape by jumping from a window on the building's second floor. Although he escaped, he injured his right ankle in the process. In the immediate moments after his escape, Bundy initially ran and then walked casually through the little town towards Aspen Mountain. He managed to reach the summit of Aspen Mountain without being noticed, and once there he found shelter in an old hunting cabin for 2 days. However, when he left the cabin, he became disoriented and began wandering aimlessly on the mountain. He accidentally missed 2 paths that would have led him down the mountain and into Crested Butte, the place he was trying to reach. During his wandering, he encountered a local resident who was armed with a gun and was part of the group searching for Ted Bundy on Aspen Mountain. Remarkably, Bundy was able to talk himself out of trouble during this encounter. On June 13, 1977, Bundy took a car that he discovered on the mountain. He drove back to Aspen and had a chance to escape, but 2 police deputies spotted the Cadillac. They pulled him over because he was driving erratically with dimmed headlights. Realizing who he was, they arrested Bundy and returned him to custody. Bundy had managed to evade capture for 6 days while on the run. Aunque volvió a estar bajo custodia, Bundy no abandonó sus esfuerzos por escapar. Mientras estaba detenido en la cárcel de Glenwood Springs, Colorado, mientras esperaba el juicio, desarrolló un nuevo plan. Logró obtener una hoja de cegueta y $500 en efectivo. Declaró más tarde que la hoja le fue entregada por otro recluso. A lo largo de 2 semanas, Bundy utilizó la hoja de cegueta para cortar las soldaduras que mantenían fija una pequeña placa de metal en el techo. Después de adelgazar aún más mediante dieta, logró pasar por el agujero que había creado y acceder al espacio de rastreo por encima. A fellow inmate informed the guards that he had heard noises from the ceiling where Bundy was staying in the nights leading up to his escape, but no action was taken to investigate this. After the Aspen trial judge made a ruling on December 23, 1977, that the Kerry Campbell murder trial would begin on January 9, 1978, and that the location would be changed to Colorado Springs, Bundy understood that he had to escape before he was moved from Glenwood Springs jail. During the night of December 30, 1977, Bundy got dressed warmly and placed books and files under his blanket to create the illusion that he was sleeping. He maneuvered himself through the hall and into the crawl space. He then crawled to a position directly above the jailer's linen closet. Since the jailer and his wife were not at home that evening, Bundy lowered himself into the jailer's apartment and exited through the door. Bundy was free, but he was on foot in the middle of a bitterly cold, snowy Colorado night. He stole a broken down MG, but it stalled in the mountains. Bundy was stuck on the side of Interstate 70 in the middle of the night in a blizzard, but another driver gave him a ride to Vail. From there, he caught a bus to Denver and boarded the 5:50 a.m. flight to Chicago. The Glenwood Springs jail guards did not notice Bundy was gone until noon on December 31st, 1977, 17 hours after he escaped, by which time Bundy was already in Chicago. Upon reaching Chicago, Bundy then took an Amtrak train to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he booked a room at the YMCA. On January 2nd, 1978, he visited a bar in Ann Arbor and watched his alma mater's University of Washington Huskies defeat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Later, he stole a car in Ann Arbor, left it in Atlanta, Georgia, and then boarded a bus bound to Tallahassee, Florida, arriving there on January 8, 1978. En Tallahassee, alquiló una habitación utilizando el alias Chris Hagen en una pensión. Se involucró en varios delitos menores como robo en tiendas, arrebato de bolsos y robo de automóviles. Obtuvo una tarjeta de identificación estudiantil perteneciente a Kenneth Messner y obtuvo copias de la tarjeta de seguro social y el certificado de nacimiento de Messner. Bundy se dejó crecer un bigote y dibujó un lunar falso en su mejilla derecha cuando salía, pero aparte de eso no cambió significativamente su apariencia. Intentó encontrar trabajo en un sitio de construcción, pero cuando el oficial de personal le pidió su licencia de conducir, Bundy se retiró. Este fue su único intento de buscar trabajo. About a week after Bundy arrived in Tallahassee, early on the morning of January 15, 1978, a violent outburst of homicidal behavior that had been suppressed for 2.5 years occurred. During the early hours of Super Bowl Sunday, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University around 3 a.m. Inside, he killed 2 sleeping women, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. Bundy used a combination of bludgeoning and strangulation to end their lives, and he sexually assaulted Levy. Additionally, he assaulted 2 other Chi Omega members, Karen Chandler and Kathy Klenner, using similar methods. The entire sequence of events took less than 30 minutes. After leaving the Chi Omega house, Bundy broke into another residence a few blocks away, brutally injuring Florida State University student Shirley Thomas. On February 9, 1978, Bundy made his way to Lake City, Florida. During his time there, he kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. He concealed her body beneath a small pig shed. On February 12, 1978, Bundy stole another Volkswagen Beetle and left Tallahassee permanently, traveling west across the Florida Panhandle. On February 15, 1978, a little after 1 a.m., Bundy was pulled over by Pensacola police officer David Lee. During the traffic stop, the officer ran a check on the license plate, revealing that the vehicle was stolen. Bundy then engaged in a struggle with the officer before eventually being subdued. As Officer Lee was taking the unidentified suspect into custody, Bundy remarked, "I wish you had killed me." Upon his arrest, Bundy provided the police with the name Ken Mensner and showed them the stolen identification for Mensner. However, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement successfully matched his fingerprints the following day. He was promptly taken back to Tallahassee and subsequently charged with the murders in Tallahassee and Lake City. Later, he was transferred to Miami for trial regarding the Chi Omega murders. Bundy enfrentó juicio por los asesinatos de Chi Omega en junio de 1979, supervisado por el juez Edward D. Cowart del Tribunal de Circuito del Condado de Dade. A pesar de contar con 5 abogados designados por el tribunal, optó por representarse a sí mismo y procedió a interrogar a los testigos, incluido el oficial de policía que encontró el cuerpo de Margaret Bowman. El fiscal adjunto, Larry Simpson, encabezó la acusación en su contra. Un aspecto notable del juicio fue la introducción del testimonio sobre marcas de mordedura. 2 key pieces of evidence played a critical role. First, Chi Omega member Nita Neary, returning to the house very late after a date, spotted Bundy as he was leaving and positively identified him in court. Second, amid his violent actions, Bundy bit Lisa Levy on her left butt cheek, which resulted in clear bite marks. The police obtained plaster casts of Bundy's teeth, and a forensic expert matched them to photographs of Levy's injury. As a result, Bundy was found guilty on all charges and received a death sentence. After the sentence was confirmed, Judge Cowart delivered the verdict to him. "It is ordered that you be put to death by a current of electricity, and this current shall be passed through your body until you are deceased. Please take care of yourself, young man. I genuinely mean that. Please take care of yourself. It is a profound tragedy for this court to witness such a complete loss of human potential as I've observed in this courtroom. You are a talented young man. You could have become a successful lawyer, and I would have welcomed the opportunity to see you practice before me. However, you chose a different path. Please take care of yourself. I do not hold any ill will towards you. I want you to understand that. Once again, look after yourself. Bundy faced trial for the murder of Kimberly Lynch in 1980. Once again, he was found guilty on all charges, largely due to the fibers from Leach clothing being discovered in his van and an eyewitness who saw him leading Leach away from the school. He received a death sentence. During the Kimberly Leach trial, Bundy actually married his former co-worker Carol Ann Boone in the courtroom itself while he was questioning her as a witness. Following their marriage, Bundy and Boone had several conjugal visits, resulting in Boone giving birth to a daughter in October 1982. However, in 1986, Boone returned to Washington and never came back to Florida. The whereabouts of both Boone and Bundy's daughter remain unknown. Mientras esperaba su ejecución en la prisión de Stark, Bundy fue colocado en la celda contigua a la de Otis Toole, otro asesino en serie responsable del asesinato de Adam Walsh. El perfilador del FBI, Robert K. Ressler, visitó a Bundy en la prisión como parte de sus esfuerzos por entrevistar a asesinos en serie. Sin embargo, Bundy resultó ser poco cooperativo y manipulador durante sus interacciones. Solo hablaba en términos hipotéticos y se refería a sí mismo en tercera persona. Reflexionando sobre su experiencia en 1992, Ressler señaló que Bundy le dejó la impresión de ser un animal y le sorprendió que los medios de comunicación parecieran no comprender completamente este aspecto de la naturaleza de Bundy, diciendo este tipo era un animal, y me sorprendió que los medios parecieran incapaces de entender eso. Interestingly, during that same time, Special Agent William Heckmeyer from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Behavioral Science Unit frequently visited Bundy. In a surprising turn, Bundy opened up to Heckmeyer and even went as far as considering him as his closest friend. Over time, Bundy began to share various details of the murders that had previously been undisclosed or unverified. This marked a significant development in their interactions. In October 1984, Bundy reached out to former King County homicide detective Bob Campbell and expressed his willingness to help with the ongoing search for the Green River Killer by offering his insights and analysis. Keppel and Detective Dave Reichert from the Green River Task Force visited Florida's death row to interview Bundy. Though both detectives acknowledged that these interviews didn't significantly contribute to the ongoing investigation, they did provide a deeper understanding of Bundy's mindset. The primary aim of these interviews was to possibly uncover the details of unsolved murders that Bundy was suspected of having committed. En 1988, Bundy se puso en contacto nuevamente con Keppel. En ese momento, sus apelaciones se habían agotado y su ejecución era inminente. A pesar de haber evitado ejecuciones anteriores programadas para el 4 de marzo de 1986, el 2 de julio de 1986 y el 18 de noviembre de 1986, la situación de Bundy había cambiado. Con la ejecución a la vista, admitió haber cometido 8 asesinatos previamente no resueltos en el estado de Washington, casos en los que había sido un sospechoso clave. Bundy informó a Keppel que el número real de cuerpos abandonados en Taylor Mountain eran 5, no los 4 que inicialmente habían creído. Proporcionó a Keppel una confesión detallada sobre el asesinato de Georgian Hawkins, explicando cómo la trajo a su auto, la atacó con una llave inglesa que había escondido bajo su auto, condujo con ella en el auto y luego la agredió sexualmente y estranguló. Following the interview, Keppel expressed his shock after speaking with Bundy, describing him as someone who seemed destined for killing. Keppel's impression of Bundy was as follows. He described the Issaquah crime scene where Janice Ott, Dennis Nusland, and Georgian Hawkins had been left, and it was almost like he was just there, like he was seeing everything. He was infatuated with the idea because he spent so much time there. He is just totally consumed with the murder all the time. Bundy had likely hoped that by revealing some details and making partial confessions, he could obtain a further stay of his execution or perhaps have his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment. There was an instance where a legal advocate working on behalf of Bundy asked the families of his victims to send letters to Florida Governor Robert Martinez, urging him to show mercy and hoping to gain information about the location of their loved ones' remains. However, all the families declined to do so. Durante sus confesiones, Bundy proporcionó información muy limitada sobre sus crímenes. Hizo promesas de revelar más detalles y mencionar más lugares de entierro si se le daba más tiempo. Desafortunadamente para Bundy, esta estrategia fracasó y fue ejecutado según lo programado originalmente. On the eve of his execution, Bundy granted a television interview to James Dobson, who led the evangelical Christian organization Focus on the Family. During this interview, Bundy consistently emphasized his belief in the influence of pornography on his crimes. He asserted that while pornography itself did not force him to commit murders, he attributed some of his violent tendencies to consuming graphic and violent pornography. Bundy suggested that the consumption of violent media helped to shape and mold his aggression into actions too terrible to describe. He further claimed that he perceived violent content in the media, particularly sexualized violence, as steering young boys towards becoming individuals similar to him. In the same interview, Bundy stated, "You are going to kill me, and that will protect society for me. But out there are many, many more people who are addicted to pornography, and you are doing nothing about that." According to Heckmeyer, Bundy contemplated suicide in the days leading up to his execution, but eventually decided against it. At 7:06 a.m. on January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison in Stark, Florida. His final words were, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Subsequently, more than 2,000 volts of electricity were applied to his body for less than 2 minutes. He was officially declared dead at 7:16 a.m. Outside the prison, a crowd of several hundred people had gathered, and they cheered upon receiving the signal that Bundy had been pronounced dead. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know in the comments. Like it and share it with more people so they can learn and enjoy with Noches de Terror to study English. I'm Cesar. Till the next episode. See you.